What's up, guys? Welcome to a new episode of the ynggpodcast. With the 2024 NHL trade deadline approaching, obviously it's the perfect time to start talking about trade targets. And today we're going to be focusing on the hottest goalies on the market. Well, these guys have been probably mentioned since the start of the season because a lot of goalies have been disappointing and, letting a lot of goals. Not playing on par to what they're expected to be playing at in terms of their competitive level. So a lot of teams are looking at goaltending, but also there's been a lot of goaltending injuries here, and one team that just lost the goalie due to a controversy that may be looking to replace that particular goalie. So today we're going to be talking about goalies. Some of them are notable names, some of them are you know not really that popular in terms of mainstream. So yeah, let's just get started with it. So the first goalie that we're going to be discussing here today is Jake Allen. So the oldest goalie of the Montreal Canadiens. They've been working on this, three goalie rotations to the start of the season, hoping that there would have been a taker to trade one of these guys. Sam Montembeault, signs an extension with the Habs. And he's been playing like their starting goaltender, and he's been receiving the most games out of them three. And then you have Caden Primo, who is the youngest one and least experienced, and he's had his fair share of good games, but also bad games. And same thing goes with Allen. But the thing is that he's more expensive in terms of his contract, and he's also older in age. And in terms of the teams that are interested, we have the Carolina Hurricanes, we have the Edmonton Oilers, and the New Jersey Devils. But at the moment, Carolina, has Ranta, they have Kuchetkov, and they went to go pick up Spencer Martin off of waivers from the Columbus Blue Jackets. So, they're going to have to part ways with one of those goaltenders if they're going to want to do that. And in terms of Edmonton, well, they have Picard and Skinner. But you have Campbell, who's buried in the minors. So maybe a bad contract, goes the other way. And in terms of New Jersey, you have Schmid, who was sent down to the AHL, who was not doing well. And Vanacek hasn't been the best either. So starting it off, guys, Jake Allen, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so obviously being a Montreal Canadiens fan, like you said before, they have a three goalie rotation that has been there since the beginning of the season. I think for Montreal's perspective, it's going to be tough to try to see what they're going to be able to get for Jake Allen, simply for the fact that he makes $3.85 million for the end of this season and then next season as well. So you get him on an extra year as well after this one. So if you're a team looking for cost certainty, it might be better off going with him. But the problem with Jake Allen is he has a modified no trade clause, which is a 7-team no trade list. So he basically has some factor as to where he wants to go, depending on his no trade list. And the other thing too that people need to understand is he's 33 years old and he's got a 901 save percentage. He's won 2 of his last 10 starts with the Montreal Canadiens, and he hasn't been, let's say, the best out of, let's say, the 3 goalies that the Canadiens have currently. And so it's one of those things where with Jake Allen, you know, yes, he can, I think, help fill a void for a team, maybe a team like the New Jersey Devils, like you mentioned, or even to some extent the LA Kings, who I think have been talked about and been linked with Jake Allen for a while, who I think he could help. But I don't know if a team like LA or New Jersey would necessarily want to take a shot on a guy who hasn't really been at his best this season. Yes, he's on a 901. Yes, he had a good start to the season, but he's only won 2 of his last 10 games. And if you're a team fighting for a playoff spot, you want a goalie that's able to win you games. Now, in Montreal's case, it's also been interesting because all 3 goalies have won and lead the league in steals. Meaning that they've stolen more games this season than expected, which is great and all. But it's a question that basically teams need to figure out is Jake Allen worth the 3.85 million that they're going to be willing to pay, even if Montreal has to retain a little bit, and are they willing to go beyond this year with him? So that's the question that I think teams are going to figure out, and I'm not sure if, as of right now, if teams are going to be willing to do that. But if Montreal does trade him, it's probably going to be for not a very high pick. I would say a 4th or a 5th would be what they would get for Jake Allen, to be honest. Zach?
To add on to that, in terms of what the fans could expect the Habs to do, um, coming with this trade deadline. Possible was re-signed to a contract, a $9 million contract, and he's their guy. He's been playing great for the past 2 years now, and fans could expect him to be the guy of the future, and he's not going to get moved. Caden Primo gets called up sometime in November, has played a handful of games. He's played pretty well. He's played in 11 games. He has started 10 this year, and he's 24 years old. And the reason they're keeping 3 goalies on their main roster is because they don't want to send one down, and that's an indication that Caden Primo would likely be the guy to get dropped down because of the situation with Allen and all these rumors, and they're going to get a return for him. So that's just another indication that the return is going to happen at some point for Jake Allen. He hasn't had a stellar season by any accounts in terms of his play. He's been pretty inconsistent this year, and Luca mentioned his struggles within the past 10 games or so. But he's an interesting name for a contender nonetheless because he's got playoff experience. Yes, his cap hit is not great, and as we know, a lot of teams, contending teams, are very cap strapped this season. But I still see a deal for Jake Allen as very plausible in a scenario probably where the Habs are going to retain some salary, and maybe an experienced team like Los Angeles would be, or the Carolina Hurricanes would be a team that would be interested in him.
Just to add to that quickly, you said that Caden Primo was called up in November. He actually was on the roster from the beginning of the season. He just played his first game in November, so I just wanted to clarify that.
Okay, no worries.
But yeah, just that. But I agree.
And the last thing, just to close up our our talk about Primo and Allen. Honestly, I think if a trade does happen, it's on deadline day, and it's like a last resort for teams that couldn't land some of the other guys we're gonna mention. I don't think that the return in a trade is going to be huge. I think max for one of these guys, third round pick, level B prospect at most. Don't expect a first round. Don't expect a second. Primo is not proven at the NHL level, even though he's young and there's some promise there. And with Allen, pretty shaky this year, and with the salary cap and how tight it is right now with teams, is it really worth it to add a guy like Allen who is not putting up stellar numbers? I don't think so. So guys, let's move on to the next goaltender. So a guy that has been spoken about for the longest time because of the contract he signed. So he signed a 5-year deal, 25 million worth back in 2022 with the Edmonton Oilers, and that's Jack Campbell. So this is a guy that if a team's going to want to trade for, it's not because he's a stellar goaltender, it's because they're taking back a bad contract to make a trade work and maybe add some, trade pieces, because you're going to have to pay up if you want to get rid of a contract. One unloading contracts, you have to give sweeteners. That's always how it's worked in the NHL. I know Campbell has been playing better in the AHL, but again, he's supposed to be an NHL goaltender. They signed him to be a starter. That's what he was with the Toronto Maple Leafs. And, there's also a debate with that. But, we're not going to get into that. So, guys, do you think a team is willing to take on Jack Campbell's contract?
No, and I'd be very surprised if any team did. And the reason I'm saying that is because this guy's a buyout candidate. Like it's at the point now where, his last 2 seasons, he has an 888 with the Edmonton Oilers in 36 games last year. This year in 5 games, 873. He has a 4.5 goals against average. Yes, he's played better in the AHL, but for a guy who makes $5.25 million, or $5 million, sorry, and has a modified no trade clause, like this dude, there's no team in the league is going to take him. And I know the only way they do is if the Oilers throw in a first round pick and want to move on his contract. That's the only way I can see. Maybe a team like low end team that maybe needs goaltending is probably going to take a chance on him. But even then, I'd be very surprised if Jake Allen got moved. I don't think the Oilers are going to be able to do it.
You mean
cap
Jack
hit
Campbell?
and Jack Campbell. I don't think they're going to be able to move him. I think that's unless, like I said, unless they throw in a first round pick and some assets into there, I highly doubt Jack Campbell has any value.
I know they're both, not the best goalies, but man, there's a huge difference between Campbell and Allen this year.
Sorry, they both start with the letter J.
That's
so it's
saying
confusing.
something. That's saying something about Jack Campbell, and I think teams that are going to be working the phone for goalies are going to have about 20 goalies on their list ahead of Jack Campbell, and then they'll maybe
Agreed.
consider him. And the move for Jack Campbell probably happens right before the deadline, when there's a team that's really desperate that didn't get the job done for their goalie. But even at that, now just thinking about it, nobody's going to take on that contract. Like,
Nobody.
unless the same amount of money is going the other way and it's another terrible contract, and maybe there's a couple of draft picks involved, some future considerations, maybe that deal gets done. But if we're looking for a hockey trade, a pure hockey trade, he is untradeable. He goes, at this point, I don't want to be disrespectful, he's been successful in the past with the Toronto Maple Leafs. Hasn't gone in his favor after signing the contract with Edmonton, and he's played some games, about 14 games in the A this year. He's been horrible in the A too. Like, I don't know. You just can't move this guy at all. And and like we were talking about scenarios. Maybe a team that is struggling, maybe a bottom feeder team could take on that contract for Edmonton. But that move could happen in the off season. It could happen.
Yeah, I agree.
Next season, it doesn't really have to happen now, and I don't think there's timing is any indicator in this situation.
Yeah, this is unmovable. This is more of an off-season move, and I think they'll give Campbell one more chance at some point, maybe at the end of the season, or maybe at the start of next season, try to increase his value a little bit. But I definitely see this as an off-season move, not a trade.
I think they're just going to buy him out.
I
flat out think that at the end of the season they're going to buy him out. That's just what I think.
The next guy, and he starts the letter J too, John Gibson of the Anaheim Ducks. So this is a guy who's formally requested but not requested to be traded. We never know, because his agent, debunked it, even though there was many reports from, analysts that are, highly respected, like Elliot Freeman and Frank Saravelli, who were stating that, he wanted out of Anaheim and wanted to go to a contending team. In the past, he was linked to, the Pittsburgh Penguins. Recently, he's been linked to the New Jersey Devils. You look at, their goalie situation. You have, Dostal, who's been playing pretty good on a bad team this year. So it kind of makes Gibson movable. But, if he does get traded, which I think he's one of the more likelier goalies to get traded at the deadline, I do believe he goes to a team like the New Jersey Devils. I think that's like the perfect fit for both the team and the goaltender. I don't know in terms of like, what they would give up. Like, I know they're going to start asking for a guy like maybe Holtz, and New Jersey might get scared, with the asking price, but definitely a first round pick is going to have to be involved. Possibly a top prospect. John Gibson, considered overrated by some, but also very underrated because he is playing on a very poor team. And I do believe that he's not really motivated to play for them anymore. And, it shows in terms of the way he plays sometimes. So going to a new team, having a fresh start, I think we could see, John Gibson, of the old god John Gibson, essentially, picking it up again and, finally, doing what we all hope for him to do. And, I think he would be a fantastic fit with the New Jersey Devils. That's just my, prediction in terms of where John Gibson goes. Do you think he gets traded, and where do you think he gets traded to?
Well, this guy's been probably the most highly anticipated goalie move for a long time, just simply for the fact that he's been linked to being traded for the last 3 seasons. We've been talking about this guy for feels like forever. But the thing with John Gibson is, I don't know how many teams are really that high on him. And the reason I say this, I know we've heard rumors of him going to New Jersey, and there's been talk about that potentially happening. This guy's a Pennsylvania native. I think there's a possibility that with everything that's gone on with Carter Hart, I could see potentially Philly with. I know Samuel Erson's had a decent season this year, and they're high on him. But if Philly want to just solidify their goaltending situation, I think maybe they could maybe take a shot at John Gibson. I don't know. But I just don't know where the value is for John Gibson. I know his numbers have been, a little bit below average over the last couple of years. That's also shown to the fact that he's played with the Anaheim Ducks. But this is a guy that makes $6.4 million for the next, 3 seasons after this one. He's also got a 10-team no-trade list. It's going to be a contract that is not going to be very easy to move, just simply for the fact that there's not a lot of cap space to be done. And for the Ducks, when you're trading him at the point of the prime of his career. So this is a guy that is probably not going to get any better than what he is. Now, goalies are unpredictable, but with Gibson, I think that there needs to be a better market for him. I just don't know that right now there is, apart from maybe New Jersey, and you can argue Ottawa, but even then, I don't think the Senators would show interest in John Gibson. I think for Gibson, it's more of an offseason move than a deadline move. Unless New Jersey's ponies up and makes a deal, I just don't see the Ducks moving him, just because from a cap perspective, it doesn't make sense to do it in the regular season. And at the same time, he's at a point where there's been a lot of he's been consistent in terms of his stats, but there's been a lot of inconsistencies in his play where he's gone, long periods of time where he's played really bad hockey, and then long periods of time where he's played good. So you don't really know what goalie you're always going to get with him. But I don't know if that's just because of the team that he's on, or if that's just because he's an inconsistent goalie in certain situations. So that's where I'm at with that. I'm not sure, but I just don't know. I don't see much of a market for Gibson right now, in my opinion.
Yeah, and well, Chris, at the beginning you mentioned people don't know if he's overrated or underrated, and that's basically it, because there's a risk involved with trading for John Gibson. Most people are led to believe that he is still an elite netminder who's been the victim of being on a rebuilding franchise, and that's why his numbers have been so low. But at that position, for that figure, you have to get it right. A team trading for a goalie especially with 3 years left on his contract beyond this season, you have to get it right. He's going to eat about 6.5 on the cap. And if he doesn't work in the first season, and his reputation is not up there anymore in the league, you can't trade him anymore. You have this guy on your books. The next move is probably to buy him out. So that's where another factor of where the risk lies with John Gibson. And I just think it's another move that's because of the cap figure as well, and because teams are cap strapped. Like I made the argument prior, I think it's a move once again for the offseason.
Mm-hmm. So next guy that we're going to be talking about, Kaapo Kähkönen of the San Jose Sharks. I liked him with the Minnesota Wild before, he got traded, and when they had the old tandem of Cam Talbot and Kaapo Kähkönen. I think it was during the COVID period. I had high expectations, for him. I thought it was going to be Kähkönen and Wallstead for the future. That was not the case. They ended up moving him, to the San Jose Sharks, and he's been the exact opposite of what I hoped for. Has been pretty disappointing. I know this is a very bad team that lets in a lot of goals, and they're last place this season. But he's still fairly young, and I do believe that if he went to another team, which honestly I see him going to a team like the Philadelphia Flyers. It's not going to cost them a lot. This is a guy that they could take a chance on. Philly's going through a retool or a rebuild at this point. I'm not really sure what they're trying to do, because they're currently in a playoff spot, which they weren't expected to be in this season. But they're playing really well under John Tortorella, one of the best coaches in the league. And with the whole Carter Hart situation, they could be looking at another goaltender right now. And so that's a guy that I think would fit perfectly there. But for him to go to an actual contending team, that's expected to go really deep, like for example, the Carolina Hurricanes, or teams that are fighting for spots like the New Jersey Devils. I think there's too much risk here to add a guy like Kakkonen. And Philly, they don't care if they're out of the playoff spot because they weren't even supposed to be in the playoff conversation to begin with. That's why I link him to Philadelphia out of all the teams that are interested in goaltenders at the moment. And yeah, do I think he gets moved? Maybe, maybe not. They do have Mackenzie Blackwood, who has been doing his best, with a crappy team like the San Jose Sharks. But I like him a little bit better than Kakkonen, and I think if they get the right pieces, in the future, I think Blackwood could be a serviceable, starting goaltender. But again, if they get a good return for a guy like Blackwood, then I think either goalie could get traded at this point.
I'm gonna be honest with you. I actually disagree that he's played bad in San Jose. I know the numbers don't always do justice for some guys, but for Kakkonen, I mean, he's played decently well. Him and Blackwood have played decently well on a team that is the worst team in the league by a long shot. Um, and so the thing is that I think this is a guy that can honestly probably be traded at the deadline. I think he's more likely to be traded than Mackenzie Blackwood. And the reason I say that is because he's a UFA at the end of the year, right? He's 27. He's a UFA. He makes $400,000 more than Mackenzie Blackwood, but Blackwood has another year left. The one team that I actually see Kaapo Kakkonen going to, and actually I see him going to two teams that haven't really been mentioned, but could use that depth in net because with the uncertainty regarding their backups, I can see a situation where they might want a guy who, has played behind a weak defense and faces a lot of shots and could be serviceable. I could honestly see him going to a team like Colorado or even Edmonton. And the reason I say that is because, and I know people talk about Colorado and say, what, Colorado? But Georgiev hasn't been fantastic this season. I know he's in the All-Star game, but his numbers aren't great. And Ivan Prosvetov has been very mediocre. He's got an .895 save percentage this year in 11 games. I think there's a possibility that if Kaapo Kakkonen becomes available and the Sharks are willing to move him, I think that Colorado could make a move to get Kakkonen in and just try to solidify their goaltending in net, just to make sure that if something happens to Georgiev, you have a goalie that's able to do it. The other thing that I look at when I look at Kakkonen and also Mackenzie Blackwood, I'm going to talk about both of them just equally because they're pretty much identical in terms of statistics. I think both teams could fit the Colorado Avalanche, but I also think they could fit the Oilers. The reason being is I know Calvin Pickett's played well as of late, and there's still question marks regarding Jack Campbell, and I think the Oilers want to figure out what's going on with them. But if you want to talk about Jack Campbell being moved, well, if you're the San Jose Sharks, you're not going to be competitive for a long time. Maybe there's a rumor or maybe there's a situation where they move one of Kakkonen or Blackwood. They give up Jack Campbell, maybe a couple of draft picks, a prospect or something, move on from Campbell's contract, give him to the Sharks where he might be able to find his confidence again and play on a team that's not trying to battle for the playoffs. And at least for the Oilers, they get themselves Kaapo Kakkonen, or Mackenzie Blackwood, who are both serviceable goaltenders and can do the job behind Stuart Skinner if needed. So I think both teams make a lot of sense. I think for them, I think that's probably more likely where they're going to end up. But I think Edmonton, if they wanted to move Jack Campbell, and from Mike Grier's perspective, I think if there's one team that would do it, would probably be San Jose, just because it makes more sense and you can have a money in, money out type of situation where it doesn't, affect the Sharks that much.
And just before Zach, continues, actually, I actually like those two teams that you mentioned. Colorado and Edmonton do make sense in terms, of their cap hit, and also in terms of adding pretty young and underrated goaltenders that are just victims of being on a bad team. So I just wanted to point that out that I do respect your two choices, but I would also throw in Philly as well. That's just my opinion. Anyways, go ahead, Zach.
Yeah, well, these two goaltenders, Blackwood and Kakkonen, are two bright spots on a really bad San Jose team. I know that the save percentage numbers don't show it, but if you look at stats like expected wins, these are two average to above average goaltenders in this league. They hold tremendous value with their contracts, both making under $3 million. you guys talked about a lot. What I'll say is that a playoff contender that's a legit contender, like example Carolina, example Edmonton, who've had demises in the playoffs in past years due to goaltending, are not gonna target two young goalies who lack the playoff experience. I don't think that's what they're going for. I think they're more likely to not going after a profile like Marc-Andre Fleury. Both of those teams, maybe not Fleury himself, but somebody with a similar profile, maybe a Jake Allen. Those two goalies, they hold their value, and a team that is looking for the depth, and especially those guys could fill in as a 1B on a pretty good team. I think you're looking at teams like Philly, and I wouldn't even be surprised if a team like the Red Wings want to upgrade their goaltender position and see tremendous value in these goalies without having to necessarily break the bank for them.
Yep, I think Detroit's another good team, to mention as well that could be looking at goaltenders. James Reimer, Alex Lyon. Who's the third guy that they have?
Billy Huso.
Yeah, I
So,
don't
yeah.
think they cut it, and also there's been a lot of injuries with those three guys throughout the season as well. I think they need a legit, starting goaltender, not like this 1A 1B, scenario that's been going on, or like this whole like three, goalie carousel that the Habs have been going through, and even the Buffalo Sabres is another team that could be looking at goaltending or trading away a goaltender because they've been doing pretty much the same thing like those two teams. So next guy to look at, Jacob Markstrom. So Jacob Markstrom, we know he's part of the Calgary Flames, who don't know what they're doing right now. Are they gonna re-sign the players that are on expiring contracts, or are they gonna trade them? Lindholm, Hanifin, Tanev. They re-signed their captain Backlund during the offseason and named him captain. So that was one problem that was solved. But what's the scenario, that we could see one of these guys traded? And as of right now, with such a hot goalie market, Markstrom's name is being, lingering with a couple of teams. And, they have good goaltenders. You have Dustin Wolf in the AHL, who he's knocking on the door right now to make the jump as a full time goaltender in the NHL. You have Vladar as well, who's on the market, and Wolf needs a spot. So either Markstrom or Vladar needs to be traded. But it seems as of right now, the goaltender that they want the most is Markstrom. So in terms of Markstrom, I do believe that the usual suspects have been linked to him, such as the New Jersey Devils. You also have the LA Kings, Edmonton Oilers, who actually tried signing Markstrom, during the free agency a couple of years ago, but lost out because Calgary offered more money, and that's why they opted out to, sign Jack Campbell, which blew up in their face. So, there's that link as well. Teams that fail to acquire players sometimes, they still keep an eye on those players, in years to come after that, especially if they're back on the market. So I wouldn't be surprised if maybe Edmonton tries to pull the trigger here. But, what do you guys think? Do you think, Calgary definitely needs to trade a goaltender? Because I think they do. And who is it going to be? Markstrom of Adar? And what can they expect as a return?
Well, first of all, I don't see how Markstrom gets traded. I mean, I know his numbers are good, but this is a guy who's 33 years old. He makes $6 million for 2 more seasons after this one. He's got a no move clause. It's like David Pagnotta says in his article. I think the only way he gets traded is if there's an offer you can't refuse, or if there's a big deal that you can't pass up. The only opportunity that I could see Jacob Markstrom getting traded is if you have him, go to a team that's in desperate need of an elite goaltender, probably like the Ottawa Senators, where you'd have to probably take Korpisalo back to try to make that deal work. But the thing is that with Markstrom, it's more of an offseason move than a deadline move, because I think in the offseason, teams have more cap space and they're trying to adjust their goaltending situation. I'd be more likely to see a guy like Dan Vladar be moved, if anything, to a team that maybe is looking for a little bit more depth in net. But either way, Calgary needs to figure it out. I don't know what the return would be, because I don't know what the asking price is, especially with Markstrom having a no move clause. but I do know that Calgary wants a lot of big things for Jacob Markstrom, and they value him highly. They need to figure out a way to get Dustin Wolf involved in the NHL level. So whether that's trading Markstrom or Vladar, they have to trade one. I just don't see Markstrom being the guy out. He's 33, he makes $6 million. It's unrealistic to think that at this point in his career that he's going to draw a lot of interest, and if teams are really going to be able to pay a premium for a guy who could be, I know he's had good numbers, but could be on the decline in the next couple of years, and who in recent years has had a lot of inconsistencies.
Look, no contending team is going to pick up that contract with that term at the trade deadline. It's not going to happen. And from a player's perspective, he feels he has the power in this situation due to his full no trade clause. So even if there were a deal that would be accepted by two teams, he would have a say in it, and he could be like, "Nah, I'm not doing that. I'm not going to that team." And so with his control, he's going to put himself in the best position to succeed in the future, and a team that really makes sense and that's going to value him and his contract. No contending team is gonna tell him, "Hey, we love the fact that you're signed for the next 3 years, but we're only getting you for this playoff push." This is not going to happen. This is a move strictly for the offseason. He's been having a really solid year, not the Vezina caliber year he had 2 years ago, but it's a bounce back from last season, and he's proven, and he is aging, diminished athleticism. He's a big guy, but he is still a goaltender who could get it done in this league, and that's all I have to say for Markstrom.
Yeah, I see. By the deadline, it's probably going to be Vladar who gets traded, and he's been linked to like the Colorado Avalanche at the start of the season. So I think that would be a good fit for a team that's looking to add a cheaper goalie that would serve as a backup. Luca mentioned Kakinen and Blackwood, but I think Vladar makes the most sense in terms of what Colorado is really looking for. And yeah, let's leave it at that. And I totally agree. Like I said before, Wolf, he's knocking on that door, and they're gonna have to do something. And if it's not the deadline, it has to be the offseason. Or I wouldn't be surprised if Wolf says, "You know what? I'm requesting a trade. I want to go to a team that actually wants me." And then that gets interesting. Then you look at the teams that are rebuilding or that are just missing that one piece and that want to add a long-term goaltender. And there's quite a few. So we'll see. We'll just keep it to that. Okay, so the next goaltender, a guy who's been in the media the last couple of weeks, who actually made it clear to reporters after a game that he wanted to be traded, and that's Elvis Merzlikins of the Columbus Blue Jackets. I know that it was reported there was zero interest in him at one point after he made those remarks. But teams might decide to look back at Merzlikins, and if they're gonna want to get this deal done, I do believe the Columbus Blue Jackets are gonna have to eat some of that salary. But I don't see him getting traded, in my opinion. I think for what he's done and for how much he gets paid, I don't think it would really interest anybody. And just taking a look, at his stats here. Where is he? Right here. Yeah, bottom of the barrel essentially, especially that you're supposed to be a starting goaltender. People have been
on a bad team, granted.
Yeah, I know, but people have been having these high hopes for him for the longest time. I remember a couple years ago when you had the Korpisalo and Merzlikins duo, everyone thought that's gonna be like the best goaltending tandem in the league, and sadly, it's not. Actually, it's Allmark and Swayman. So, both those guys, Merzlikins and Korpisalo, completely fell off the face of the earth, and here we are. Korpisalo is gone, and Merzlikins is probably on his way out very soon, or maybe he'll potentially get bought out because of the remarks he's made, and maybe Columbus doesn't want to deal with that headache.
It's tough because with Merzlikins, I don't think he's a bad goalie. I think he's a goalie that's been put in rough positions with Columbus. His past numbers show that he's capable of being a good goalie in this league. Last year's numbers were awful. This year's numbers have been mediocre at best. The problem with Merzlikins is his contract. This is a guy that makes 5.4 million for the next 3 seasons after this one. It's not an easy contract to move, and he's 29 years old. He's had a lot of problems in Columbus. I think there's a possibility that eventually he's going to get moved. I think if it's again, this is another guy that I think gets moved at the deadline, not at the deadline, in the offseason. But the reason there's no interest for him now is because, like Zach said before and alluded to with other goaltenders that have term, contending teams are not going to be interested. But this is a guy who needs a fresh start, right? He needs to go somewhere else. He can't stay in Columbus. I think in the offseason, with teams that have more cap space, I think a lot of teams might revisit this and might be able to give Merzlikins another chance. But at 5.4 million, it's tough to really say. I think Columbus, if they do decide to move him, have no choice but to retain salary, like you mentioned. But right now, I don't think there's any team that's interested. In the offseason, I think that could change. But as of right now, it's a tough one with Merzlikins. I liked him, but last 2 seasons, he's shown that I'm not sure he's played at an NHL caliber that he needs to play at. So I'm not sure what to think of him. And that's why I think it's hard to assess a market for a guy like that, especially with the contract and the money that he makes. So,
Yeah, I think he just shouldn't have run his mouth and just play the hockey because, like, play the hockey, play yourself into a favorable position if you really want to get moved into the off season.
yeah,
And don't talk about your agents speaking with other teams. Let's not do that. He drove his value completely down. It's a move that's hard to make. We've been saying it over and over. It's the contract, it's the term. So why say anything? And that was just a bad chess move on his part, and he's gonna have to wait for the offseason. He drove down his own value, so we'll see what happens when it comes to that. But in terms of the player that he is, he's a good NHL netminder. You guys know I'm a Sens fan. Korpisalo didn't work. Maybe in the offseason they could try for Merzlikins at a discounted rate with some salary retained by Columbus.
I think they should stay away from Columbus goaltenders.
it's probably better.
Look, I think the Sens are just gonna try anything until it works. It's started with Murray, now it's Korpisalo, and then Merzlikins might be the next victim next season.
We shall see. But, like you said, there's a trend going on here. A lot of buyout candidates, a lot of goalies that are not going to be traded because of their contracts, because of their age, most likely going to be off-season moves. So, it's going to be interesting at the end of this episode, looking back at actually who gets traded. Mrazek, we could skip because he signed a contract extension. So you have Vejmelka of the Arizona Coyotes. So you have Connor Ingram, who out of nowhere kicked ass this season and has been one of the best storylines this year in terms of breakout players. Ingram was claimed off waivers last year from the Nashville Predators. I thought that was a dumb move from the start. Didn't have the best season with the Coyotes last year, but this year really finding his groove and doing an awesome job with the Coyotes. So he's proven to be their starting goaltender for the years to come, and he's still young as well. Vejmelka has shown in the past that he's been very solid, but it seems to me that he lost his spot to Ingram, and he's been dealing with a lot of injuries. That could be this. You said the same could be said about Merzlikins as well, but he's a backup as of right now. And do you think he gets traded by the trade deadline?
You know what? If there's one, I actually do think there's a possibility he gets moved. I actually think he could probably end up in LA. And the reason I say that is because he makes 2.725 million this year and next. This is a guy that played 52 games in 21-22, had an 898. Granted, Arizona was bad. Last year, 900 save percentage in 50 games. And then this year in 20 games, he got an 896. So he's a below 900 goalie on a team in Arizona that hasn't always been great. Okay, now I know this year it's a little bit different. I think, personally speaking, that if he plays on a team that's a little bit better defensively, I think he could be really, really good. And I actually think that a team like LA, or even to some extent New Jersey, could make a lot of sense for a low risk, high reward type of move. Because Vamelka has proven that he can play 50 games in the NHL. He's shown it. So yes, he's a backup right now because Ingram's playing well, but this is a guy that you can rely on to play 50 games. He's done it 2 years in a row. And I think for a team like New Jersey who need steady goaltending, they might be able to get that out of Karel Vamelka and not have to pay much to get him. The only concern with Vamelka is he doesn't have playoff experience. So it would be a raw goalie going into the playoffs. But if you need a guy who's going to be steady for you and play a lot of games and be consistent, Vamelka's been known to do that in the past, and he's done it on defensive teams that haven't always been the strongest. So I do think there's a possibility that he gets moved at some point in the deadline. If he doesn't, I mean, it's because Arizona's trying to make a playoff push and they want both goalies available. But I do think that there is a shot that he could end up getting moved at some point.
Yeah, he's a netminder who holds tremendous value with his contract and the belief that he is a better goalie, like you said, than his numbers. I think he's in a very similar predicament to the two goalies in San Jose here. But if I were Arizona, I wouldn't want to trade him because they are still in the playoff hunt. They're gunning for a wild card spot this season. Yes, he did not retain his starting role this year. But I think when you're a team that's pushing for playoffs and you need goaltending is going to be the difference maker more than ever. You need your depth. You need two netminders you could trust between the pipes. And if I were Arizona, I would give him until the rest of the year to assess what you want to do with him.
Yeah. And, closing it up with, our list of goalies before we move on to the next segment, Fleury and Josie Saros. So, Fleury, he stated since the start of the season that this could very well be his last season. Minnesota has been, very underwhelming. It looks like they're not going to make the playoffs. Fleury, he's been showing that he's been, slowing down due to age. He's not the same Marc-Andre Fleury of a couple of years ago. And, I do believe that he could be on the move by deadline. Bill Guerin is looking at his options right now, seeing what he could do. And this is a team that has, Philip Gustafsson, who was really good last year. This year, really, has a setback in terms of his statistics. But they also have Jesper Wallstedt, who's in the pipeline, ready to, make the NHL. Same scenario as Dustin Wolf. And the same could be said in terms of the Nashville Predators. You have Askarov, who's looking to, make the jump to the NHL. And now they're looking at Lankinen and, Saros on who they're going to trade. But, they're, as of right now, they're listening to offers on Saros, but they're hoping to extend Saros. And I think the plan long term is to go with Saros and Askarov as a goaltending duo moving forward. Nashville's a very weird team. Trotz said that he wanted to be competitive. So, I mean, maybe, they don't even sell anybody, to be honest with you, that we expected. But, when you're adding guys like Ryan O'Reilly during the offseason and Luke Shen, I mean, those are guys that you want, to help your team make the playoffs and go on a little bit of a run. So, obviously Trotz, I think, has it in mind that, he wants a competitive team. So if you want a competitive team, you're going to have to keep a guy like Saros, unless, Askov is really, really going to surpass him in terms of, his production as a goaltender. So, we'll see what happens there. I believe Fleury does get traded at the deadline. Don't expect him to go to Toronto because he nixed the trade to go there a couple of years ago. I see him, linked with teams like the Edmonton Oilers, Los Angeles Kings, Colorado Avalanche as well. Colorado loves, French goaltenders, with Patrick Roy and also Jose Theodore. So I wouldn't be surprised there. And then in terms of Nashville, I think that's more of an off-season decision that they're going to make with, their goaltending situation. But again, Wolf, Askarov, and Wallstedt all ready to make the push to the NHL. So, hard decisions are going to be have to be made for the Nashville Predators, Minnesota Wild, and Calgary Flames.
Yeah, just quickly on Fleury. I think he's a lock to get moved. I think this guy wants to win at least one more cup. Minnesota's not making the playoffs this year. He's probably getting moved, and I think he's likely going to get moved to either New Jersey or Carolina. I think there's likely a chance he gets moved to Carolina. I think I see it more in Carolina for him. I could see Edmonton. I just don't know what the expectation is for them. But I do know that Marc-Andre Fleury in the playoffs is a guy you want to have. And I think Carolina, with their goaltending problems, cannot go, if they make the playoffs, cannot go into the playoffs with Spencer Martin and Peter Kochetkov or Antti Ranta. So they have to make a move. And I think that Marc-Andre Fleury fits exactly what Carolina needs, a guy with playoff experience, a guy who's won a Stanley Cup multiple times, both as a starter and a backup, and who's taken and been to multiple Stanley Cups in his finals in his career. So I think that makes the most amount of sense. I think he probably ends up a Carolina Hurricane by the end of the deadline. Quickly on Saros. Saros is a guy that's a hot name, right? He's a Vezina candidate. This is a guy that, yes, hasn't had the most productive season this year. But man, oh man, do I see him in an Ottawa jersey. And we talked about this morning in the group chat a little bit. I know Zach really wants Saros in Ottawa. I do see it. I just don't know if Ottawa would be willing to make the move on Saros.
I like that fit.
Heck, if Ottawa becomes that team that is willing to
They need it
address their
badly.
goaltending, I think Saros makes a ton of sense for that team. And I think that if Saros does get traded to Ottawa, and it makes sense because they have Askarov coming up in Nashville, so they can move Saros. Man, oh man, do I think the Senators could be dangerous for years to come, because that's been, I think, their biggest problem, Ottawa, is they haven't been able to get goaltending this season from Korpisalo or Forsberg or Sjogard. So getting a goalie who's been a Vezina candidate and who's shown that he's capable of doing it, man, oh man, do I think that could be a big story for them. So I think Saros is more of an offseason move, but I honestly, as a Habs fan, I can't believe I'm saying this. I want him to be an Ottawa Senator. I think that would be really cool to watch, to be honest. I won't lie. So
Yeah, I think he just has to get over the fact that Stützle tripped over his pad yesterday, and he got called for a penalty and had to send his teammate to the box in the third period.
That was funny.
He's definitely the profile that the Sens are look. We've talked about this in the group chat, and the conversation in the group chat is coming here. They have to nail the goaltending position in Ottawa.
Agreed.
It can't be a stopgap. It can't be a guy like, okay, he had a good half a year. Maybe he reestablished his name, and then we'll take a chance on him. We're going to sign him for 4 or 5 years. No, that's not how it's going to work. You need a guy who's established like Saros, but who's been consistently performing at a high level. And that's a move that's going to happen in the offseason. There's going to be Ottawa has the assets to get it done. They have the draft picks. They have some B-level prospects they could throw in there, and some very good roster players. But that's the conversation for another time. And as for Marc-Andre Fleury, I think he's just perfect. He's a perfect fit for Edmonton. He fits the profile of what they need with the playoff experience. Has, like you said, he's won it as a starter, won it as a backup, so he could accept and partake in any role. And if he is looking to contend, there's no better way to do it with guys like Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl in front of you. So that's all I got to say on Fleury. And yeah, UC Saros is definitely a very hot name. That's probably the hottest name that's in the goaltender mill right now. And a move could be imminent in the next couple of months.
Okay, so final segment of the podcast very quickly. We explained, everything in detail, but if you would have to, say where a goalie would land based off, the teams that are in desperate need of a goaltender, just name them very quickly. So, LA, who's your pick?
Go for it.
I'll go Jake Allen.
Zach?
I'll go Jake Allen.
Yep, I agree. Jake Allen. Okay, Edmonton Oilers.
Fleury. That was my take.
I say Fleury as well. Okay. Colorado Avalanche.
Ooh.
Blackwood or Kakinen. That's me.
Zach?
I say maybe the netminder from Arizona.
Vejmelka.
Edmonton. Okay.
Yes.
For me, it's Dan Vladar. Okay. Carolina Hurricanes.
Fleury.
That's a tough one. They need a goalie with experience. I think Jake Allen could also be a suitor for Carolina.
For me, I would have to go with, looking very quickly here. Mm, yeah, I would have to. I mean, I chose Allen already for Los Angeles, so I'm gonna have to go with someone different here.
You don't have
Uh,
to. You could go with the same guy if you want.
okay, maybe I'll say this is 50-50. I'd say either Allen or I would say, um, man, John Gibson. I know that's
Wow,
crazy,
that would be a
but
big
yeah,
move.
yeah, I think, yeah, that's what I'd have to go with. Okay, Toronto, do they get a goalie? Yes or no? They stay
No.
put. Okay,
No,
Philly, do
but
they address?
they
Yeah,
should.
okay,
You
I
forgot New
agree.
Jersey, by the way.
Yeah, we're gonna get there soon. Philly,
Okay.
do they address the Carter Hart situation and get a goaltender?
You know what? In the offseason, I'm going to say I think they're going to be suitors for UC Saros.
Yeah, that's a possibility. I see Saros lands in Ottawa during the offseason. That's just my opinion. And Zach, what do you think Saros
I
ends
think
up?
they'll take a flyer on Blackwood to address the need now
That
because they're
makes
still
sense. That makes sense.
comfortable in
That
a
That
looks,
playoff
makes sense.
yeah,
position.
That makes
yeah.
sense.
And for me, I said Saros go to Ottawa. For Philly, I would say Blackwood or Kakkonen makes sense for me. New Jersey now.
Vejmelka.
Um,
Yeah.
for New Jersey, I don't know. That's a tough one for me. Wait,
I'm going to say,
Chris, give your answer, and then I'll sit on it.
Uh, I know I say it's gonna be an off-season move, but like if they really are desperate, uh, and Vladar doesn't get moved, then I would have to say Markstrom goes to
Wow.
yeah.
I'm gonna say short term Vejmelka or Allen, but that's I just because I don't know if how much New Jersey is gonna be willing to spend on goaltending. They should, but it depends on what Fitzgerald's gonna do. So I'm gonna say Vejmelka or Allen.
And in terms of other teams in NHL that that need to adjust their goalie needs, are we missing anything, or we think
I
we
don't. I
we
think every team is pretty good. I think those are the
Yeah,
teams
and
that
I'll
really
round it
do.
off by I didn't give my pick for Carolina. I'll say Jake Allen.
Okay, perfect. So some teams are landing the same goalie according to our predictions. So it's 50-50. We're kind of torn here. So guys, thank you so much for watching this, very long episode, but we hope that you like the informative, you know, uh, you know, video that we've made for you guys in terms of the goalies that are on the market that could potentially be traded at the 2024 trade deadline. It looks like a good chunk of them will be moved by the 2024 NHL offseason, but we'll see what happens, guys. Make sure to write your comments in the comment section below if we covered any of your goaltenders, for the teams that you guys love to watch. Please state your predictions as well, and anyone who's just interested in NHL trades, we'd like to hear your predictions as well. Guys, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel if you haven't already, and we'll see you on the next episode of the Young Nets Podcast. Thank you so much, guys, for watching.